Good morning, friends. Aloha. Good to see you. We're continuing with our dance classes here, the two-step and the four-step, and now we're to the third of these phases, which happens in this particular order. As you heard in the original quotation, sometimes Shoghi Effendi would change the order. He says, study the writings and then meditate on them and then pray for guidance and confirmations and then act. So this is the stage of study we want to talk about. The essence of this is, how can the poor give to the poor? Abdu'l-Baha asked this question. How can the poor give to the poor? And all of what Baha'u'llah is saying, immerse yourself in the ocean of mine utterance, in the ocean of my words, is that we should acquire riches from the revelation. We don't have it in ourselves, we acquire them. Once we acquire them, then we're able to share them with others. And there's a lot of correct emphasis on trusting in God. But study of the writings is the part about tie the camel and then trust in God, Trust in God, but tie your camel. Tying your camel is taking in, absorbing the principles and basic teachings of the faith to the point where when the inspiration comes, you kind of have content also. Do you remember that first morning I was mentioning Abdu'l-Baha telling Julia Thompson, proofs. He emphasized proofs. You've got to collect the proofs. Smiles aren't enough. But she had a beautiful smile. She was, you see the pictures of her. She's full of laughter, contagious laughter, and such love for the Master. When he was describing the hearts of some of these basic Baha'i women that were around him, he said, this radiant heart of Mae Maxwell, when he described Julia Thompson, he said, and she has a boiling heart. So it's a lifetime job. Obviously, you're not going to just be able to study it in a minute, and it needs fairly regular discipline. And eventually, as you build up the substance of your understanding, then new lights of understanding come into your thoughts, into your mind. And oftentimes, I think, as we teach the faith, we're surprised. We listen to ourselves and we're surprised at what we say. Oh, that's a good point. I have to remember that one. kind of thing. They're not our own inventions. It's a wonderful flow. And yes, let's not delay teaching the faith. Even when we don't know anything, I remember we had the first Baha'i in Bluefields, Nicaragua. He was so enthusiastic. And he just loved the Baha'is and loved the faith. And we told him, we have to share that with others. So he'd go and tell them. He said, there's a new religion. Oh, it's so wonderful, so wonderful. Yeah, what's the name of it? I can't remember the name of it, but... Well, who's the founder? Who's the prophet? I can't remember that either. But there are people here who can tell you. Really come. And then he'd bring these people, that were out of curiosity that he was so charged up. So that's about the minimal level of knowledge that you can proceed with. Some of us go along on that a long ways. But meanwhile, systematic study of the writings. What does Shoghi Effendi say? If you look at the compilation on deepening that the House of Justice prepared for the Baha'i world, originally 1981, and analyzing the letters of the Guardian, you'll find there's a sequence that he suggests in different ways. First of all, he urges us to read the writings. This is a good start. How many of us have bookshelves full of Baha'i books that we haven't quite read yet? Yeah, I have a lot of them too myself. How do we move that stage? He says, so he focuses in on certain works that he emphasizes, especially the Baha'is should read these works. And that original list, usually it expanded because he began speaking about it before he created some of the new books. But the Igan is definitely there. And we already have a number of tablets about Abdu'l-Baha saying we should read every day the hidden words, read from them. We should memorize the hidden words. So that's a first step that goes along with our prayers very nicely. Then he said the Kitab-i-Igan should be read. And he says that, some answered questions. And oftentimes he includes the Dawnbreakers, because the Dawnbreakers has the essence of the spirit of heroism and devotion that we need to move ourselves out of a simple mode of talking about the faith when an opportunity presents itself to actually seeking out waiting souls. How different are those Dawnbreakers from us? They're human beings. They were animated by certain spiritual forces. Shoghi Effendi talks about the Baha'is of the West becoming the inheritors of the spirit of the Dawnbreakers, All of us need to absorb these things. So he says, read. Then he says in another letter, read and reread. Hello. It's not enough to read it once. Pilgrims at the Guardian's table, he asked if they had read the Kitab-i-Igan, had they studied the Kitab-i-Igan. Another pilgrim group later, the Guardian said, I asked this question of the believers, and one of the men said, yes, he'd done it. So you can't do the Kitab-i-Igan, It doesn't finish. You need to go over and over and over. So maybe we think, well, we've done it. I've read those. Yeah. Do you remember anything? That's a good question to ask yourself. Reading, rereading, he says. And he talks about painstakingly studying the various basic books of the faith. Now, friends, you don't confuse this with the Ruhi system. The whole Ruhi is a training program to place us in action, to give us confidence that we can act in a way, we can do things that will be helpful to the faith. And its original design was for brand new Baha'is that didn't know anything about the faith at all. So they learn about it through the Ruhi system, through the study circles. There's a marvelous force the house has set up in the world. Of course, it's mentioned by the Guardian to some extent, and institutes were existing before the institute that we have now. But all of it's evolving and going forward. And the institute itself says how you should concentrate on reading the holy words. The Ruhi books themselves, particularly 6, 5, and 6, 7, they talk about this study of the writings, making yourself a personal program of the writings so that with some system you can get through the basic books. It takes time. Shoghi Effendi says about the Word of God, he urges new believers. I've seen several letters where he says, use your leisure time for reading the Holy Word, for reading the writings of Baha'u'llah. And in one letter he says, the Guardian hopes you will find at least a couple hours a day to read the writings of Baha'u'llah, which suggests to us that proportionate to the amount of effort we put into looking at the writings, reading the writings, actually, to some degree, because we all fight this a bit, acquiring a taste for reading the writings, so that we don't fall asleep after 10 minutes. So maybe we read them with a pen in our hand or with a computer with us, and we take out phrases and verses that speak to us at that moment, because all of it doesn't always speak to everything. There's things that, I love this passage, or I love this particular verse, or whatever it is. Copy them down. Make yourself a collection of gems, of jewels that animate you. And once you're finished studying that for a while, go and start again. Read and reread, painstakingly study. The next stage, he says, the friends, when they read the books, they must digest their contents. Because they're not only reading, because now, I'm through page 50 now, on page 300, I did it, I'm going to do the Agon business. No. Think about the content of what you're reading. And that brings us back to the meditation part. Ponder my verses, he says. Consider these points. Why is he bothered? Why is the supreme manifestation of God bothered to write this line or two here? Some reason for it. What is it? Can I find it out? Praying that he helps you to penetrate the meaning of the verse. Another thing. Does he stop with digest? No. How many letters we have, he says, you must master the contents of these books. The Gone, Some Answered Questions, the Dunbars. Be able to repeat them. Have absorbed them to the state where you can repeat them in a truthful, realistic, accurate manner. Big job. Does he finish there? No. It's the last stage, he says. And then memorize characteristic passages so that when you speak about the faith, you can bring quotations from the writings into your presentation. He said those are the things that most effectively penetrate and touch the hearts of others. So we have, what do we have here? We have read. Read and reread. Painstakingly study. Digest. Master the contents of these books. And finally, memorize characteristic passages. Do you know what the preliminary in Iran for being a mullah or studying Muslim texts and things is to memorize the Quran in a language which is not your own by the time you're 13, 14 years old. I think we sell ourselves short, we think we can't learn. Oh, I'm no good. I'm no good at memorizing. Yeah, thank you very much. Who is good at memorizing to start off with? It's a question of practice. It's a question of alerting the mind. It's a question of finding methods to how to repeat and remember and hold the things. Friends, at the end of the course, I'm going to ask you to say a little prayer for me because I'm in trouble. I hand out a lot of good advice that I don't follow myself, and this is a very dangerous course of action. But I feel compelled to do this. I like pushing others rather than doing myself. Okay, so that takes us through the kind of spectrum now. How he emphasizes, he says, the Agon contains the fundamental teachings of the faith. It contains the most basic of our teachings. Where have we ever had an explanation of the nature of the manifestations of God? The Quran, nothing. The Bible has a few. The New Testament has some of the statements of Christ. Mysterious, out of multiple. Baha'u'llah puts it all together. It's the most significant book. It's the supreme book of his revelation, with the single exception of the Aqdas, because the Aqdas has the laws in it. But it is the primary, he says, the preeminent doctrinal work of the faith, the book of certitude. So important. Now he takes the key passages from that, 24 separate passages, and puts them in the gleanings a couple of years after he translated the Agon for us. As I heard early on when I was a Baha'i, the Baha'is were saying that people were saying, we don't have any Bible. You don't have a Bible. A tablet here, a tablet there, that's not the Bible. No, we have the gleanings. We have the essence of all the different styles of Baha'u'llah brought together by this terrific, infallible guardian of ours, knowing what passages would be appropriate for this stage of the development of mankind, this early stage, the formative age, if you will. I've seen a letter of him. He says, I've chosen these passages in such a way that they can be put in libraries. There's nothing there that's not suitable for the non-Baha'i public. Sometimes we think, oh, it's too strong or too much. He didn't think so. Gleanings, he hoped, would become the constant companion of every believer. The only way I do that is have it next to my bed, and I try to read something from it in the evenings and something in the morning, and just keep going round. Once I get to the end, I start at the beginning again. Gradually, you build up a kind of awareness. Oh, there's something about that in the gleanings, and you go to it. To the pilgrims once he said, you know, the friends should read the writings that I've translated, because of the position of the guardian's interpretive power of the meaning and mind of Baha'u'llah. These are most trustworthy. Other translations will come, but it's not the same. And it's not the same. It's a struggle. I mean, in Haifa we're trying to translate new books and things, and through various committees and various consultations. But we always use the framework of the Guardian's translations. How did he translate these terms? We have a big computer program that matches all the English of the Guardian with the Persian and Arabic of Baha'u'llah or Abdu'l-Baha or the Bab, a few passages of the Bab. How different the few passages Shoghi Effendi translates from the Bab and the book of selections of the writings of the Bab. They're there. It's not inaccurate, but there's a different power because of the Guardian. So he's giving us these gifts. Of all the gifts, we should hold very much to those to start off. We want to be sure. What has he done? He's done the Igan for us. Then the Dawnbreakers itself is really the writing of Shoghi Effendi. Nabil has written one long volume from the declaration of the Bab until the passing of Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi chose an early portion of it, which is the richest part and the most detailed part, because afterwards Nabil was close with Baha'u'llah. He was in the Holy Land, and there weren't the kind of episodes that you read about in the Dawnbreakers. That was the most stirring period of the cause. And he's extracted those, and he's edited, and he's translated it. So it is the most accurate, trustworthy account of the history of the faith, he said. And any history that's written after this has to keep making reference to. If you're going to tell a story, somebody tells a story, a little different version from the Dawnbreakers, you want a footnote, see the Dawnbreakers for the version from the Dawnbreakers. God Passes By, which of course was written after these other letters emphasizing digesting and mastering, is another essential gift from the Guardian, who wasn't the eyewitness of these events and yet writes in such a way that you could believe that he's seeing it himself. Takes a little bit of concentration, reading through it. The language is so elevated, it's eventually going to transform much of English expression. I think once when mankind starts concentrating on these things, they're going to be so grateful for that. Then Shoghi Effendi gave us the gleanings. Then he gave us another volume, and see if you can guess which one it is. It's the one that he said after he sent it out. He said that he hopes by the perusal of this volume, more than any other one, the friends will draw nigh unto Baha'u'llah, that he may draw nigh unto them. Love me that I may love thee. First step is us, then he matches it. We have to have free will approach him, and then he responds. Do you know what book that is? Prayers and Meditations, exactly. Prayers and Meditations by Baha'u'llah, which is the title of the book, by the way. It's not Prayers and Meditations, author Baha'u'llah. he includes the Bible Baha'u'llah in the title of the book itself. This is an amazing volume. I think it's a kind of forgotten volume. Lots of the friends don't even seem to know about it. It has all the basic prayers that we have in our smaller prayer books, many of them extracted from there. And it has both prayers and, according to my understanding, meditations are the prayers that Baha'u'llah is in his first person, he's speaking to God himself about his sufferings. I think we have a tendency, we start reading a prayer, and he says, "Thou seest me shut in my prison house," and we think, "Oh, that's not me," and we skip over to another prayer. Let's let Baha'u'llah say his prayers himself. Give me something that is suitable for me. And yet, half the volume is made up of those kind of passages. Why is Shoghi Effendi taking the time? He's letting us look at the inner life of the manifestation of God. It's something that is a book of study as well as of prayer. You can learn so much about the nature of the manifestation. So many of the truths that are in the Igan are repeated in fresh ways in these meditations of Baha'u'llah. Again, this is a book that's so vast that you kind of get lost in it. It's hard to find your way again. But if you start with a little notebook and you take out the paragraphs that mean something to you, especially as you read them, write them down, and you create your own little compilation of extracts from prayers and meditations, and you have that with you. Now, of course, we've got everything in our telephone so we can call God directly, but these are nice little booklets. I used to have them in all my pockets. Well worn. And it's wonderful. It's your own personal collection. It corresponds to your level in that building we were talking about, going up floor by floor and seeing more. Actually, friends, the building doesn't exist. It exists potentially when we start watching the parade. But it depends on our actions and our deeds. If we send building materials up there where the next floor can be constructed, the next floor can be constructed, and gradually you can move up into the building. It comes from our interaction with the revelation. Let me quote the Kitabi Aktas, paragraph 182. Immerse yourselves, is that on the screen? Yes, the second one on the screen. Immerse yourselves in the ocean of my words, that ye may unravel its secrets and discover all the pearls of wisdom that lie hid in its depths. Take heed that you do not vacillate in your determination to embrace the truth of this cause, a cause through which the potentialities of the might of God have been revealed and His sovereignty established. I'd like to study Baha'u'llah's words, but I don't have any university education. I don't have any degrees. I don't know. Quote number 1 from the Igan. The understanding of His words and the comprehension of the utterances of the birds of heaven are in no wise dependent upon human learning. They depend solely upon purity of heart, chastity of soul, and freedom of spirit. And Shoghi Effendi always watched for sincerity of intention. Sincerity of intention is a terrific motor force that carries us forward. I'm going to learn the Baha'i writings and I can quote them in the meetings, then I'll be elected to the assembly. Maybe even to the House of Justice. Illusions, delusions. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I said sometimes from Haifa you could see some people arise, some men arise, and travel a lot in the year before the election, talking to friends, smiling a lot, all that kind of stuff. In the house, you kind of, had a funny smell to it. Not too many, but a few. I used to think to myself, after being on the house a few years, the punishment for these guys is they should have to sit on the house for a couple months, and they would see what that is. It's not what it looks like from outside. It's a terrific load, an intense work schedule. You know, it just wears you down to the quick. Intention, good intention, very important. What does Abdu'l-Baha? He says, it is my hope. I'll bring this up here. It is my hope that you may put forth your most earnest endeavor to accomplish this end, that you may investigate and study the Holy Scriptures word by word, so that you may attain knowledge of the mysteries hidden therein. Be not satisfied with words, but seek to understand the spiritual meanings hidden in the heart of the words. Shoghi Effendi. To deepen in the cause, we've all heard this phrase about deepening. I think deepening is very parallel to immerse yourself in the ocean of his words. Immerse yourself in the ocean of his words is different from take a sip every day in the morning and the evening. You know, that's one thing. But this question of getting down into to have it surround your whole existence, permeate all your thoughts, create new motivations in you of life and of stir you to raise you up to new heights. All these things. Deepen. To deepen in the cause means to read the writings of Baha'u'llah and the Master so thoroughly as to be able to give it to others in its pure form. There are many who have some superficial idea of what the cause stands for. They therefore present it together with all sorts of ideas that are their own. There is no limit to the study of the cause. I'll like to repeat that again. There is no limit to the study of the cause. You're never going to finish. The more we read the writings, the more truths we can find in them. And the more we will see that our previous notions were erroneous. Well, I think it's a daily experience in studying the writings. I think, oh, that must be what that means. The verses reveal the meaning of the verses. The more we read, the more, at first it's so enigmatic and difficult, and it's another realm for us. But as we explore it, as we can gain capacity with the terms and the different phrases that are there, then we see how they begin reflecting on each other. The verses, the meaning of the verses are in other verses. So the whole expanse of your mind, holding these various things, enables you then to draw, when you think about a subject, see a new one, the other quotations come and influence you and help to give you a correct knowledge of that, a correct vision, at least appropriate, sufficient to communicate to others, without, as he said, some superficial idea of what the cause is, and presenting it with all sorts of ideas of their own. I was talking to you last night a little bit about Leonora. Leonora was confessing to me, poor me, I felt so embarrassed. This giant of the cause, she said, I just have to tell you, she said, I'm not a good teacher, you know. I can't give talks. And I told you her method in Manaus when she said from memory talks of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. And I said that I'd heard that the Guardian had, to the pilgrims, he'd been talking about this subject. He said there's 3 levels of Baha'i teachers. The first level is the enthusiastic Baha'i, who has a pet subject in the cause they always like. Whoever they speak to, they start talking about equality of men and women, or one universal language. That's the essence of the Baha'i faith. Or science and religion, hand in hand, you know. And so he says they say that, and then they say their own ideas they add on all their own ideas about the subject, about the greatness of women, or whatever it happens to be. Go on and on. So that's stage one, he said. Stage two, they begin reading the writings, they begin thinking about the writings sufficiently that when they open their mouths, what they say is the Baha'i teachings. He said, seeking, it should give it in its pure form. Okay, pure form. I can paraphrase it in my own words. That's a help. But then he said the third stage is when you've memorized passages from the writings and that you have these phrases from the actual texts woven, threaded through your presentations. That has a big effect. So I said, Leonard, look, you're at the top stage here. Which she obviously was. She didn't need to say anything. She was so luminous, light coming out of her being, following what Abdu'l-Baha says in the Divine Plan. What does he call us to? He says, you must become incarnate light. Another tablet he says, you must glow from head to foot with the light of Baha'u'llah. Who can resist? If we as Baha'is begin approaching that model, who can resist? How different that from, I try to teach people, but they're not very interested. I like the people that answer. I tell them about the faith or something, and they say, oh, I'm so glad you found something that you can follow. No, wait a minute. Ay, ay. Now, so Justice reminds us we're in an epoch of the unfoldment of the divine plan. This is the latest stage of its expression. But we should be going back to some of the fundamentals of that document, of the tablets of the divine plan, to see what the underlying spirit of is the actions and functions that we're presently performing, the formula of the moment, so to speak, to carry it out. We want that always to infuse the actions that we take now. Go back to the Master. Go back and drink from that document. How he talks about what are the essentials, 3 essentials to be apostles of Baha'u'llah. He calls us to that. Arise. The tablets of the divine plan were revealed during the darkest hours of the First World War. And the major portion of them, of these 14 tablets, were held by Abdu'l-Baha until the war finished, because it wasn't safe to send anything, Didn't want them being sunk on the high seas. This was the plan for the propagation of the faith for hundreds of years ahead of us. So he sent them, he called for a convention in 1919, and he sent the tablets with his representative, and they were presented there, and it's called the unveiling of the divine plan. And actually there were one of those, these like stands for posters or paintings or something. Each one of the tablets was on one of those, and it had a set of curtains, and it had a little drawstring. And now we're unveiling the tablet of such and such a state, or such a part of the country, or for the whole thing. How would I know that? Ruhiya Khanum said, I was one of the little girls that was pulling the strings. Imagine the experience. And where she went afterwards, goodness. After Ruhiya Khanum's passing, gradually the treasures that she had, notes, such affectionate, beautiful notes that she'd received from Shoghi Effendi to herself as the helpmaid of the guardian, with the exception of the greatest holy leaf, she says she's clearly the greatest woman of the cause. How many places she went. She used to collect countries like the Indians used to collect scalps, She had them on her. She would say, I have them all on my belt. Added another one this year. Added 2 more this year. And just went everywhere. She said, I was shocked one day, Shoghi Effendi asked me, what will you do after I pass? Oh, she said, Shoghi Effendi, what do you mean? And he said, no. What will you do after I pass? And she wanted to know what she should do. He said, you'll arise and go and encourage the friends everywhere. And she did that. And she liked very well to get down and dirty in the teaching field someplace and have it recorded. And she said, some women think that's too good. They're too good for that. Let them see me in the canoe sitting in the muddy water. And nobody's got an excuse after that. Not that you're looking for excuses. Then if the ladies can do that in the cause, why can't the men arise? You look at the main teachers of the West, they're all women. They were the great champions in the West. In the East, they were constrained by the cultural limits that women weren't allowed to arise. And we have the example of Tyre, but as you know, she ended up strangled in the bottom of a well. Not very welcome. One of the dear friends so on fire with the cause, a woman in Iran, wrote to Baha'u'llah how she was so deprived of pioneering, she wanted to pioneer. What should she do? How could she do? And he writes this glorious tablets back to her. He says, be ye a pioneer to the country of the love of God. That's the essential movement. The essential movement is the movement of the heart towards God. If you can add to it physical movement in the outer world, excellent. He said, but the women are excused from that at that time, but it's obligatory on the men to arise and move. I heard the dear Hannah cause, Horace Holly. He said that pioneering is not so much moving from an old place to a new place as moving from an old self to a new self. It all has to do with our relationship and attitude towards the cause. Here's one of these letters. It's got here. 8. I will pray for you at the holy shrines that you may be able to devote a few hours each day to the study of the revealed word and be graciously aided and guided by him to exemplify the spirit that animates the word in your daily transactions. Daily transactions could be your business. You might say, if I spend a few hours a day studying the Word of God, how's my business going to prosper? Well, maybe it's the flip side of that. If we devote more time to studying the writings and exemplifying the Spirit and penetrating that and letting that become the energizer of our lives, maybe our work will become more effective. There's this wonderful quotation, I can't quote it, I'll paraphrase it, from Abdu'l-Baha, which says that in the cause, there's a level of service where the Spirit performs the tasks and accomplishes the difficult administrative activities. The whole thing is compelled. One of the old saints, the French saint, he said, when you hull peas, you can either sit in the sunlight or you can sit in the shade. We want to hull our peas in the sunlight of the sun of truth, with all that light. We want to carry on our activities assisted by that warmth and support. Shoghi Effendi hopes that you will exert all your efforts, first in deepening your own knowledge of the teachings, and then strive to attract other people. He says, arise to teach the cause of God. And in the first instance, he says, teach your own selves, and then teach others. Again, how do the poor give to the poor? We can give something, yes. We're not going to slow down our activities. You're not going to say, oh, okay, I'm not going to teach the faith till I finish reading the Dawnbreakers 3 times or something. Not going to be possible. But there's a blending of these two together. And that's a point I'd like to, I think that the Guardian is making over and over again in his statements. This is also from Shoghi Effendi. You should exert all your efforts upon deepening your knowledge of the teachings and literature of the cause. The writings of Baha'u'llah and the Master are like vast seas. The deeper you go into them, the more priceless treasures you will find. And it is only after acquiring those treasures that we can hope to share them with others. You know, there's also a tablet of Baha'u'llah cited in the Gleanings. He says, arise and proclaim the cause of God. Whoever responds to your proclamation, teach them. Look at this. Proclamation first, teaching second. In other words, you inform people. You make them aware that such a cause exists, that a message has come from God, with all the appropriate levels of wisdom and looking at the example of the Master, how he did it. Once that's done, if they respond, then teach them the details. You don't have to give the whole message at the first instance. You have to attract them. And Shoghi Effendi says, receptive souls with the hearing the name Baha'i or Baha'u'llah will become curious. There's something inherent in the soul that can respond to that if they're not entirely buried under their crazy ideas. Number 12, the same again. This is a re-emphasis. Shoghi Effendi hopes that you will exert all your efforts, first in deepening your own knowledge of the teachings, and then strive to attract other people. You should form study classes and read the important books that have been published, especially the Yugan, which contains the basic tenets of the faith. It's very important. It's also very important to hold study classes and go deep in the teachings. A great harm is done by starting to teach without being firmly grounded in the literature. Little knowledge is dangerous, fully applies to the teaching work. The friends should read the writings and be able to quote from the tablets when discussing subjects pertaining to the faith. I go back, I pray, Baha'u'llah, forgive me the mistakes I've made in teaching in a way that drove the people away instead of attracted them to the faith. What do I know? How I did it? Did I go too far too soon, or did I go somewhere that doesn't represent the teachings? These things, we've to constantly sharpening the way we do things, honing our skills. You realize the manifestation of God, this is the first day He's left it to the people to spread His teachings. There were few chosen people. They became the clergy, inherited that kind of a station, You realize how much difficulty the Bab faced in talking about religious subjects. It was forbidden to open your mouth to talk about, make statements about religion if you weren't a mullah. Impossible. You have no qualifications. You can't possibly open your mouth. A mercer, a merchant, is going to start talking about the inner realities of the oneness of God and existence? Baha'u'llah faced the same thing. He was of a class that wasn't allowed to make mention of spiritual subjects. You didn't discuss them. You could read them and think about them, but you didn't talk about them with others, so to speak. It's a very different climate we have now. Such freedom. Such access to text, more text than generations before us had at all. So we ask ourselves, are we taking advantage of them? There are undoubtedly stages of knowledge. The fuller the knowledge, the firmer and more worthy of the name that Baha'i is. But surely we cannot create one standard for all. True Baha'is, however, will never cease studying and deepening their knowledge of the cause. You don't finish. It's not an early phase of our Baha'i existence. Something that goes on and on with us. Another important one. I would strongly urge you to utilize to the utmost possible extent the wealth of authentic material gathered in Nabil's stirring narrative, and to encourage the youth to master and digest, here we see these phrases again, the facts recorded therein as a basis for their future work in the teaching field and as a sustenance to their spiritual life and activities in the service of the cause. I hope some of these quotations, maybe they'll get into your newsletter, or you'll have a reference, a point where you can go on your computer and find them. Oh, here's one for today. They, the students in the Baha'i summer schools, have to be taught the habit of studying the cause constantly. For the more we read the words, the more will the truth they contain be revealed to us. We're believers in the revelation. Are we letting it speak to us? Are we absorbing it to the extent needed for, not just for the world, but for our own growth and development? Your thorough, you can find these other ones. Sorry, we have to skip some of them. There's not enough time. Your thorough and continued study of the teachings gives you an opportunity to prepare yourself for the teaching of the cause. To study and to teach. These are the twofold and sacred obligations of every responsible and active follower of the faith. I remember years ago I found a passage from Shoghi Effendi to one of the believers in the West Coast of the United States, who had written him and said that he was planning to make a study of the Ugan during the summer months when he was free from vacation period or something. And Shoghi Effendi praised that so much. And he said, indeed, to become an adequate teacher of the cause, you must master each and every detail of that holy book of the Kitab-i-Ugan. Wow. I was in the Holy Land when I found that. And so I started a class on the Ugan for those that were interested in coming. It was 14 months long. We went through every line of it and tried to make cross-references and footnotes and so on. Most of that is compiled into this companion to the study of the Ugan that got published some years ago by George Ronald, which contains letters from the Guardian which help us to understand certain things. You know, there are other points. He says that when the promises, that divine promises that Noah had assured his followers of victory were not fulfilled, then the people left the cause. And he mentions 40 or 72. Well, that's kind of, we'd say 30 or 40 or 2 or 3, but 40 and 72, why is Baha'u'llah? Maybe it's an Oriental something. No. There were 2 sets of traditions, and people endlessly argued about whether it was 40 or 72. And Baha'u'llah doesn't get into it. He says followers were 40 or 72. You solved that problem. That's not, I'm not going to add to the division because of that. Another thing he talks about, the Prophet's teaching for 500 years. And you say, wow. When he writes the letter, he said, the years referred to in the Yagan and in the traditions of the holy books are not the years as we know them now. There's an entirely different meaning. So you don't imagine that these people really did live that long. I think Abdu'l-Baha says the intended age of human beings is 120 years. And he talks about the prolongation of human life as one of the things science will turn its attention to once it stops making implements of war, armaments, and things like that. When the science goes to the benefic, he says, the refinement of the human brain and the prolongation of human life. Interesting. Those are the subjects you want to get into, friends, if you're thinking, what should I study in university? How should I apply it in my life? Look at that list of things that he suggests there. Look at the line in the Kitab-i-Aqdas that says fresh water should be available to everyone, everywhere. What is the implications of that for the water sciences and for conservation? There's other things that aren't mentioned at all, Certain steps of the pharmaceutical industries and things. They're not there. Look and balance it all out. He says we're still in a primitive stage of medicine. How can you heal yourself? He says, first approach, food. The right kind of food to balance out the elements in the body. The second stage, a single substance for a prescription, for a remedy. And if only then, if those doesn't work, then a compound remedy. It's interesting to bear in mind. We're just beginning to come alive in some of those areas. This is an interesting one. Gives us some idea of, besides coming together, we need to come together. We need to have this fellowship. We need to have the love. We need to look in each other's faces and feel the light. Shoghi Effendi hopes that your summer school will increasingly develop and will become an important center for the spread of the message. You should try to raise its intellectual as well as its spiritual standard and to pave the way for its future development into one of the foremost Baha'i universities in the West. Much stress should be laid on the thorough study of the history and of the teachings of the cause, and particularly of the nature, basis, and outstanding features of the administration of the faith. This is the vehicle, with the laws of Baha'u'llah, combines to become the New Jerusalem that's descended. You review the writings of the Guardian. He talks about the terrific creative energies released in the heroic age of the faith from the acts and the revelation, the verses of the Bab and Baha'u'llah together, these twin manifestations of God. Those energies, those creative forces that were released, he said, in the formative age, and this is formative in the sense that now something's forming out of those energies. The formative age, he said, is raising up agencies. Those divine energies are crystallizing into visible agencies through which Baha'u'llah can propagate his cause. And that's what we're doing. We're kind of the building blocks of these new agencies. Not always comfortable. We go to the feast and we say, I wonder if I can bear another one of these. Tells us we're not organizing the feast in the right way. It should be uplifting. We should be rejoicing, but it doesn't always happen. But by sheer perseverance, we repeat and we go back and gradually something builds in us, if not in the 19-day feast. We have to learn patience and be magnanimous and be compassionate towards the new Baha'is that are coming in, and maybe have some ideas that aren't yet in full accord with the writings. I think be very careful to not be critical, to not think and feel negatively about others because of the consequences for us and for the community. Disunity stops the cause down altogether. Whatever is the cause of disunity, we have to get it out of us, and throw it out of the community. Then we start locking together in these pre-established patterns that Baha'u'llah has set forth. Those patterns which, when we lock together like that, we become a radiant mirror, he says, until from pole to pole the world will reflect the lights of the Abha kingdom. First the individual heart adjusts, then all the mirrors line up, then the image just grows and grows and grows. There's one more tablet that I don't have here to project, but I wanted to read for you. You'll find it in this compilation on deepening the spiritual life from the House of Justice, provided by the House of Justice for the Friends. This is translated, it's a letter of Shoghi Effendi, originally in Persian, to the Baha'is of Azerbaijan. And it kind of encapsulates, I think, the whole importance of study, how it relates to our lives in general, in an outer way, in our activities, and then what promises are inherent if we absorb the revelation, if we absorb the guidance of this, if it becomes part of us, if we begin acting on it, if it eliminates the negative things that it's directed at, what will happen to us? Praise be to God that the spirit of the holy writings and tablets which have been revealed in this wondrous dispensation concerning matters of major or minor importance, whether essential or otherwise, related to the sciences and the arts, to natural philosophy, literature, politics, or economics, have so permeated the world that since the inception They have so permeated the world that since the inception of the world, in the course of past dispensations and bygone ages, nothing like it has ever been seen or heard. Indeed, if an avowed follower of Baha'u'llah were to immerse himself in and fathom the depths of the ocean of these heavenly teachings, and with utmost care and attention deduce from each of them the subtle mysteries and consummate wisdoms that lie enshrined therein, such a person's life, materially, intellectually, and spiritually, will be safe from toil and trouble, and unaffected by the setbacks and perils, or any sadness or despondency. What a promise. Thank you, friends.